Hi friends. I noticed some of you have been getting your bats in the mail. See, I participate in this fundraiser live stream every year called the Project for Awesome, but most of you found me through that, so you already know. But people usually go on the live stream and they sell off merch or memorabilia or whatever to raise money. I've always made people little doodles of bats, but for the money people are spending, I don't know, I kind of wanted people to have something moderately nice this year. What's some art that I could reproduce in quantity that I wouldn't mind making and sending to you? Line-cut printing, said the part of my brain that's been steadily regressing since the pandemic began. That would work. You love doing that. When I was in high school, I took every art class I could get my hands on. Drawing, painting, design, sculpture, photography. Well, photography until I dropped it to have the same study hall as my boyfriend, but mostly I took every art class I could take. And even in my free periods, I often went to the art room to sit and work on my class projects, or paint on spare paper, or just be in peace among the weird kids. Once we were assigned a linoleum printing project. He drew a design and carved it out of a rubbery block to make a large-scale stamp. That part was hard, working against the resistance of the linoleum to get the depth and width of your lines right, trying to picture a reversed image, learning to work with the negative space, that area around your subject that helps to define its boundaries and give a composition shape. But once you had your block, the process of creating prints was so soothing, rolling out the ink on a glass plate to make it tacky, spraying it onto the block in a smooth and even layer, flattening out the paper to make sure that all the ink adhered with no gaps, laying out the prints in rows or clipping them up to dry. It made me feel like such a capable machine. One lunch period in high school, I got in such a flow that I made nearly 100 prints. Laid out to dry, they covered all of the tables in the photo room, and I quickly got my unsupervised art room privileges revoked. But it was worth it, because I loved it. And so I did it again. It was a simple design that I made, some flying bats against a full moon, but I botched my first attempt. Trying to make it so that the bat shapes would be the stamp, I carved out the void of the sky, but anyone who actually knows what they're doing would tell you that that's the opposite of what you want to do. You can't cut out everything. You don't just want an outline of the barest bits necessary to make the image. It's actually what you leave untouched that gives an image context and color. I used ink pads to print it this time to save a little mess and expense, but the feeling was the same. I could press down the ink and smooth out the paper and settle into a joyful rhythm of turning out little artworks that I knew would end up in your hands, and that despite their mistakes, you would see that I cared about them, and so cared about you. I stopped making art regularly after college. I just wasn't ever all that good at it, and it took up space in my life that I figured I could make better use of. Working, writing, doing chores, building a personal brand. Chasing achievement, really, is what crowded art out. I carved out all of the things that I thought weren't important or seemed like they were in the way. But maybe, I realize, I've done it the wrong way. That all of the striving looks a little weird and empty on its own. And that there are things that deserve space in my life for their own sake. Things that don't serve any other purpose than to be a loveliness in the background. In comments, tell me about the activities that make up the negative space in your life. This video is brought to you by the Radish Collective, my community of Patreon supporters, some of whom I will be sending the prints that I made today. I'll see you next week. Bye!